something that our students are very interested in, is actually hearing from someone who's walked the walk of entrepreneurship and started with an idea and has actually brought it into the real world, and that bumpy process as well. But since you are an engineer, I think it's very important for us to warm up first, because we know engineers can be a little dry. So
Okay, that's good. That's really good.
so I just have a couple of rapid fire questions for you, and then we'll sink our teeth into something a little bit more substantial. So first things first, your favorite thing to cook on a braai?
Ooh, steak. Any day. Steak, medium rare steak. And I'm happy.
Awesome. The last book you read?
Wow. I'm busy with an audio book. I wonder if I can quickly just get you the name, because I listened to it yesterday. What's Best Next?
Ooh.
What's Best Next? Yeah, that's by Matt Pearman. It's quite an interesting
Good.
book on work, just the framework on work. Yeah.
Okay, then I have 3 sentences for you to complete. The first one is, 5 years ago, I was.
A researcher.
Do you miss it?
I do. I have to say, it's nice to be involved and so it's like deep into research. I do miss it, I have to say. I now live it that through students that I have the privilege of supervising, and I'm like so jealous of them, but they're doing well.
Entrepreneurs must have.
Wow. Resilience, energy, focus, heart.
Heart, yes. And then the last one is a big one, so take it wherever you want to take it. South Africa needs.
South Africa needs people to care and to invest back into the country, into the society. Yeah, I think that's what we need. Caring people. And I think we have that. We need more of that.
Agreed. And so I think that's a beautiful place to start, because I can vouch for the people in the virtual room with us that these are youngsters that have shown incredible commitment and care for their communities, their environment, and I think ultimately for the future of this country. So I really hope that this presentation will be inspiring and just maybe something to fill your cup a little bit in the almost middle of the year, where we know most of us are maybe a little bit tired as well. So Jason, before we start talking about the bigger concept of sustainable futures and smart cities, GreenX Engineering is your baby. It was born from your research in your PhD. And I know I've been following quite closely on Instagram the amazing work that you've done with solar power projects for under-resourced schools. But aside from being like, I almost want to say Batman for solar power in South Africa, what else does GreenX Engineering do as a business?
I love that question. So we look at the whole energy resource management spectrum from the metering and the design of the energy system to the actual generation and even the procurement of that generation. That's why a lower income school is able to get like R500,000 worth of solar equipment. And that's really nice because people need it right now due to load shedding. But before that, there's like a whole bunch of services that we do. I'll touch on it a little bit later as well. But the major one is the legislated energy performance certificate. And all the corporates need to get it. Any public building larger than 1,000 square meters, they need the certificate. And my my foreshadowing is that certificate is going to come to the residential space as well, because that's what happened in Europe. Like people aren't able to sell their houses without these certificates. I think that's coming here, and we're
I'm
trying to
taking
gear up for
notes.
that. So yeah. But I like that our country is going that way. But we're able to do those certificates as an accredited inspection body. And then the other fun one that I really like is we do these energy management systems where you can basically view your house's usage and your school's usage on your phone, and you've got all of this data coming in, and you can play with the data, and it can remind you if you're going over your usage or of like anomalies that you maybe have. So those like the fun things, and then also replacement of older and inefficient energy items. That's also a thing that we like to get our teeth sunken into, because it's just overlooked for some reason. People just like you just
Mm,
overlook that this thing is actually taking so much energy.
mm. Absolutely. Yeah, so I've made a couple of notes because I think something like feedback systems and this idea of real time knowing what's going on is something that we speak about quite a lot in the program, especially from a design thinking perspective, and understanding what the user needs to know to effectively change their behavior. So I'm sure there might be some questions around that as well. Um, Before we get into Jason's presentation, I just want to remind you that you're welcome to use the chat as we go through the presentation. If there's a question, and you can just type it in the chat, and we'll revisit it at the end. Jason is going to just tell us a little bit about his thoughts on smart cities in South Africa. And then, yeah, we'll just have a very informal conversation. This is just an extension of our classroom. So feel free to share your questions and thoughts in the chat, and we'll revisit those at the end. So Jason, the floor is yours. Um,
Thank
I'm
you,
just
Dr. Goods.
I'm just going to switch my video off while you present. Otherwise, I will just sit and nod along like this.
Should I leave mine
Yeah,
on? I
yes,
leave
you're
mine on?
welcome
Okay.
to. Thank
Sweet.
you.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I will try not to bore you. I'll try not to be dry. I'll try to keep it very exciting. And I'm so happy to be speaking to peers and to fellow energy champions and smart city champions of the future. So yeah, this is super exciting. A little bit about me. I was born in Stellenbosch, born and bred. I had the privilege of doing a PhD in electrical engineering, and we did research on how school buildings use the electricity, how you can reduce that wastage, if there is wastage, and then how you can move schools over to um, their own generation, their own storage. And then I further had the privilege to actually make that a company, along with my supervisors and along with other investors. The university owns some of the company. So you'll see here, I have the emblem of the university, which is really cool to use. And my broader vision is to have sustainable impact, um, and it needs to be proven. And I want to do that through efficiency, and that's my vision currently. I'm trying to also expand that, but currently that's my vision solidly, and I'm able to live that out through the company, able to help the schools and the hospitals and the office buildings in South Africa through these following services. And if you look at the background, you'll see our team. I love to work with them. Yeah, I would not be able to do this alone. It takes a team of young, energetic people to actually tackle our issues in South Africa. And I think you guys also speak about this, but it's like multifaceted issues that we actually have. And this is just one perspective. So the services that we offer are on the screen. The first one is actually a legislative need in our country. It's in the National Energy Act that all buildings larger than 2,000 square meters, if it's privately owned, they need a certificate. And we've been accredited to do those. And I think that's actually a good starting point for our country to take, because that certificate just highlights the efficiency level of your building. as much like a fridge would have like those letters and those colors, this you would not get for your building. And then in order to actually have a real-time live feedback, we do energy management, and this is a management system that's able to give you real-time data on your energy usage. If we do see any wastage in your usage, we're able to actually replace it with our service called energy efficiency. And we've got a few nice platforms that we use to actually replace and actually before that identify the inefficiencies and then replace them. We do work with third-party installers to actually do that, third-party electricians that are local. And then furthermore, once you've now optimized your building's energy usage and you have a nice management system in place, only then we go solar with the resilience, energy resilience, and that just means how you generate your energy and how you actually store your energy. That's in a resilient way, in a sustainable way. The most prevalent one right now is rooftop solar, lithium batteries, and I think that's still gonna develop into a few other technologies. And that's what we have for now. And then the last service is quite an interesting one because not everyone can afford a R500,000 solar system or even 200,000 rand for lights even. But we're able to get the financing in to actually to make that affordable for the lower income communities. So with that being said, it's really cool to be talking on a topic such as this, being building sustainable futures and looking at it at a focus of smart cities in South Africa. And I just want to put a disclaimer. This is just my perspective on this topic. I am open for an interesting discussion, and yeah, these are just my thoughts on it. So, um, starting with the last thing that I mentioned now, which would be South Africa, our beautiful country. As you can see here, um, Eskom actually anticipates. Oh man, my lights are going on. That load shedding is coming back. So you'll see this is published by them. Load shedding is coming back in the winter, and that is really interesting because for the last 30 days and basically 4 weeks, we've not had load shedding. And there's a lot of interesting debate around that. Why is that? Is it before the elections? And I'll give the benefit of the doubt to Eskom and actually to the deputy president, saying that it's the plant maintenance that they've been doing in the summer. So that's a little bit of good news, right? And then I just want to point our attention to the amount of capital that's going into upgrading the infrastructure, the transmission infrastructure. It's massive, 300 billion, right? That's a lot of money. But then still, load shedding is looming, although we haven't had load shedding for the last while, which we're thankful for. But load shedding is still looming, so we shouldn't sit on our hands. And I have some good news that we are not sitting on our hands, right? People are moving. There's a renewable energy uptake, and then also um, just a note that a lot of the renewable energy uptake has been from the private sector. But our public sector has also been contributing. Now, this view of a smart city is not it's not something new for South Africa, right? I did a little bit of digging, and you can see that even in like the State of the Nation address speeches, like that's being mentioned, like the talk of a smart city, the talk of actually having smart grids, like that's being mentioned. So it's not something old. It's something that we've been thinking about, and a little bit of a win, and I might even say a big win for our country is uh, the installation and the implementation of utility scale batteries. Even though we only have one, I'm open for correction. If anyone knows of another one that's out there, I know phase two is coming. But how cool is this, right? I think in order to have a smart city, you first need to have a resilient energy system, and we're going now from a centralized energy system to something that's decentralized and very modular. But a big thing that we did not have is the capacity to store energy at a large scale, and we're on our way there, which is really brilliant. And I'll tell you guys a secret as well. After my after my masters, I also had the privilege of working for Eskom for 2 years, and that just opened my eyes to see how our power is being produced. And one thing I can tell you is that we do store a minimal amount of power. So this makes me super happy, knowing that we're moving towards utility scale batteries and just energy storage in general. Um, One last thing I'll say here, or a couple of last things, is that moving towards a smart city, and smart grids and all of that, it's really great for accelerating economic growth and for improving efficiencies. And we have a lot of innovation that's coming in. But there's also the trade-offs that you can find in some of the literature, just saying that um, there's a few things that we are neglecting, such as there is a digital divide, and I would even go as far as to say there's an affluence divide, um, that we have to deal with. And then you can also speak of becoming more smarter and everything being interconnected. There might also be some misuse of things, privacy issues, misuse of AI, things like that. So we just have to be aware of how we navigate this landscape of a smarter city. There are some trade-offs. There aren't only benefits. Um, but yeah, the move towards smart cities have benefited a lot of our larger goals, such as the development goals. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But moving along swiftly, um, looking at the futures, and looking, yeah, a bit past what we have now, where we're going. You guys will know about all of these goals that we have: 2030, 2050, all of these goals. And I'm glad to tell you that in our country, we've got the Smart Grid 2030 vision that we're aiming for. So I'm happily welcoming smart grids and writing up strategies on that and making moves towards that. And in our legislation, it's also being brought in. So um, with regards to the energy performance certificates that I mentioned earlier, our country has legislated that all the buildings need to get it by the end of next year. Let me just correct myself. Not all the buildings, but all buildings of the occupancy classes, for schools, for offices, and also for places of entertainment. And then I'm sure they'll move on to the residential space. That's in the talks now, from our Energy Development Institute. But I'm happy to also say that, while that's being legislated, that is something good. There's also been a lot of a focus on actually getting a lot of investment to Africa, and by extension also then to South Africa. And I think a large part of it is not only the upscaling and the investment in our generation, in our transmission, but also we need to look at our energy behaviors. And I like what was mentioned earlier about the feedback. I think going towards a smart city, it will give us the abilities to actually know what we're doing and to manage it well, and to cultivate in us these energy behaviors that are healthier for us, for our pockets, and for the environment. Um, so I look forward to a future like that and to a vision like that, but I think it's going to take lots of hard work, and I'm happy to have like lots of cool peers with me to do that hard work. Um, but yeah, the energy transition, it is moving, and there's a lot of investment coming. And then talking about sustainability on our left, those are the sustainability goals that smart cities have advanced just because of their nature, but we shouldn't leave behind the other sustainability goals. Um, and in my case, with GreenX, when we do install a solar system at a school, that immediately enhances the ability of that school to go on with their education. It saves them some money. They can use that money somewhere else. So they smart cities, and specifically having energy resilience in lower income communities does affect um, the other goals. But here I just wanted to emphasize that the focus can be narrowed in on these goals. We shouldn't forget about the other goals. And you can see here, this is also from our Energy Development Institute. This is how they say we are progressing with our SDGs. But I think a smart city should have the enhancement of the SDGs in mind. It shouldn't leave that behind. And we can see there's a few things that we are leaving behind that we should take up again. And then lastly, what does this mean for us in actually building these smart cities? Um, I think that smart cities, it gives us the tools to actually be involved. I mean, we all have a smartphone. There are amazing apps out there with the Internet of Things and the Fourth Industrial Revolution having spawned all of these equipment that's able to interact with each other and with us. We have these tools to actually have a lot of impact, but we shouldn't forget that we are the people that being that should be building this future. We're involved, and it ultimately should be benefiting the people and also the environment. Um, so with that, I'll swiftly end off, and I'm super keen for discussion. I just want to thank you all for listening to that. I hope it wasn't dry.
It was not dry. You did very well for an engineer. Thank you
Let's
very
go.
much.
Let's go.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Cool.
Jason.
Oh,
Yeah, I think I first also just want to commend you because I think the way you started it off with your vision, it's something because we have such a strong focus on entrepreneurship in our programs as well. It's so important, I think, to be clear on what your vision is. Maybe because to work in this field can be difficult and sometimes quite negative, or at least a lot of setbacks as well. And I think um, it's that difference between trying to fix everything, which none of us can do, right? We can
yeah,
all do the little bit that we're called to do, but then to be very clear for yourself, what is the thing that you are being called to do, and how do you get there, and how do you bring people along for the ride? And I think that was beautiful and clear. So thank you for sharing that with us as well. Um, I'm going to ask student Jason in the chat, posted a question. Jason, I think I can unmute you. Would you care to maybe just ask your question directly to Dr. Jason? I think I have unmuted you. Can you
Yes,
speak?
yeah. Thank
There you
you.
go.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jason. That was very, very insightful. Yeah, it does sound as weird as it sounds. Uh, it
hey
does.
Jason.
Yeah, yeah,
Do you
yeah.
guys know each other?
No,
Oh.
No, we don't. But I look forward to meeting you one day.
one day it is. So yeah, my question was more on something that we just had, rather something that I've always been asking myself. Being that let's call renewable energy forms part of SDG 7, right? Which is part of the smart city, let's call it, yeah, that part, part of the smart city segment, right? So the components, for instance, that we use for solar panels, wind energy, and the likes, currently they're designed for like a 25-year lifetime. So after that 25 years,
What happens?
yeah, what's next? Because I don't think there is a plan even for the projects that have been decommissioned, like in Europe, for instance. The components are just being sold back to Africa. So
Yeah,
yeah. So how do you ensure
it's a good
that the
question.
smart cities are sustainable at the end of the day?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I think I think it starts there, and just recognizing that that is happening and asking these questions. Um, Ultimately, uh, I think I need to think a bit more about it. But ultimately, I think there would need to be some sort of market um, for the recycling of these things, because in my mind, what's going to happen is the 20-year cycle will run out, and then these items will either be replaced by a similar item, which will give you 20 more years theoretically, or it will be replaced with another technology. But in either case, you're left with some sort of like equipment that's not being used, that something needs to be done with that. And I think you're right. You're asking the right question. Um, we do need to think about that. Do need to incorporate that like very soon into our implementation strategies. The decommissioning, it needs to be part of what we do, and I think it might be good if it starts with like the legislation of it. So that's my take on it. What do you think, Jason?
I mean, like the decommissioning part of it, because with some of the South African government's programs, they ask for like a decommissioning plan, but like
Yes.
you just come up with those things like the figures. As much as you're going to assume a 25-year increase at CPI, take into consideration inflation, at the end of the day, it's you people are still assuming it's still a guess game. Like even the plan is
Mm,
going to be very vague. It's going to be okay, we're going to remove the turbines, we're going to remove
yeah.
the concrete, we're going to remove the roads, but
Basically,
after
that
you
just
remove it, where are
shifting
you
it,
putting it?
just
Hmm.
shifting the problem to the future,
Exactly,
basically.
exactly. So you're just at the end of you're just being compliant with the contract, quote unquote, just
Yeah.
to ensure that yeah. So okay, you're
I,
going to remove it from there, but where are you putting it
Mm,
afterwards?
Jason, I think the fact that you are asking that question, for me, it's encouraging, and I've always maintained that this is the kind of thinking we want to instill in our students, right? So that we need to be critical about anything that we propose as a sustainable solution, because sustainable for how long, right? And only when we really start thinking about closed loop systems, and we challenge our own idea of what waste is, because that's a man-made thing. In the natural world, we don't see waste. It's part of a greater system. We were having this conversation in class as well. The second years were debating things like nuclear energy and so forth. And I think maybe the hard thing about sustainability, where we kind of landed as a class in our discussion, was that oftentimes it is choosing the lesser of two evils. And we
wow.
always we need to kind of accept that our technologies are also limited. It's what we know for now, right? I think the one thing we've kind of omitted a lot in our designs and our planning and innovations is that precautionary principle. So the idea of thinking through things before we unleash them in the world. Our landfill sites aren't necessarily full because people 100 years ago thought that this is how it's going to turn out. They planned for what was happening at the time, and that's what the solution they created. Same with coal. I don't think when we started making coal electricity, we did it because we wanted to burn the planet down. We didn't necessarily know, and a lot of it has to do with the
Yeah.
scale at which things were started, and not ever anticipating consumer culture and population growth the way that it has happened. But your generation, unfortunately, is the generation we're looking to say, well, you need to find crystal balls to look into the future, and maybe do something differently. I had listened to a talk the other day. I think it was a TED talk, and the presenter actually challenged the audience and said there is no such thing as renewable energy. Um,
Yowza.
because even when we're capturing wind energy, we're using non-renewable materials like aluminium and all of those
Yeah,
precious metals that we're mining to capture the energy. So
store
uh,
it. Yeah,
yeah, and again, like battery power is probably or batteries are one of the biggest no-nos in our renewable energy journey. It's the thing with a very short lifespan, with a lot of environmental implications once it needs
expensive.
to,
Yeah.
once it's no longer useful. But that being said, I think the the big challenge for all of us is to learn to live with ambiguity and to hold both sides. Um, the solution is certainly not to say, well, solar isn't completely green, so we need to stick with coal-fired
Cool.
electricity until we have something that's a clean energy. But it is important to be realistic and for us not to go into a solar revolution, and ultimately that just means we're kicking the bird and just another like 2 generations down the line and go, y'all figure out what to do now that we've run out of the components to make solar panels and we've just buried the old ones that don't work.
I like what you're saying. I think there needs to be this tension because we need to move forward. And yeah, we can't just sit and wait until we figure out like this perfect thing. I don't think there's gonna be like something that's so perfect. It's just gonna be better and better and better. And then yeah, we're just gonna have to keep these things in mind. Like as we're implementing solar, we need to be open to accept something else that's a bit better. As you say, we shouldn't be like solar champions.
Yeah, and I think we are living in an exciting time where at least there seems to be money flowing into innovation in these realms. So the possibilities are, I'm not going to say limitless, but it does seem that we are moving, and there are more and more options that are lesser evils, and we're seeing faster turnaround times in terms of the innovation there. Jason, you mentioned battery technology and improvement in that space. Are there any other emerging trends in innovation in green tech that you're particularly excited about?
The one is vanadium batteries. But they're very large. And I know there might be some people in the room, in the virtual room, that know about them. Like, yeah, that's one that I know about. Um, yeah, I'm not so familiar with the other one that like
Mm,
it's almost coming to my mind. But that is one, vanadium batteries.
mm. Um, I think one of the other kind of realms I want us to touch on, because a lot of our students also sit with this question, like where do I fit in the working world and as a change agent? And I wondered, I mean, you have this experience of being a researcher, you've worked for a big company like Escom, and now you're doing your own thing, and just how we can drive kind of collaborative approaches, because especially in a country that is as complicated as South Africa, I just, my sense of it is I keep coming back to this idea of community and collaboration, and that none of the specific role players, not government, not private, not grassroots, have all the answers, and we need to
Mm.
find ways to connect across those divides. And yeah, maybe just some of your thoughts in based on your own experience and what people should be looking for as they enter the working world, in
Wow.
terms of where they can be effective.
Wow, what a question. I think that's a great question. Um, I I do think that given the skill set that you have and the education that you're privileged to receive, I don't think we should hold back. Like we should use everything that we can there to actually help society. And it might look differently. Maybe you get the chance to do a startup um, and get investors. Like go for it. I'd say you're young, go for it. Even if you're not that young, go for it. Because I think there's so much of the pie that like we just need people to do amazing work. Um, that saying of like the harvest is ready, but the workers are few. Like I think that is so true. But I get so glad like to see like a whole like a research group like this going into the workforce. And I mean, people will be studying further, but you're taking all of this knowledge into the workforce. Um, don't forget it. And then even going to a larger company. Um, I think there's a lot of value in that, in just learning how to work, because like you think you know as you're studying, but just getting into the working environment, like then you really feel like what it is like to do your own work, to work in a team, and I think yeah we should have this notion of like we're all trying to accomplish this one goal, um, and it shouldn't be in silos. But that is easier said than done, because pretty soon there'll be all these looming things like I need to pay rent and I need to get married, and like all of these other things will be there, because I mean we are still individuals, um, but I think what keeps me going is like the bigger picture of actually contributing to like taking away the suffering in the world, and not just focusing on myself. So I think that'll help a lot. And that actually makes someone unstoppable, I think. If you have all of these skills, like you guys have a great education, adding to that just the attitude of not just wanting to help yourself, but to help others, it's going to be someone that's unstoppable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes back to that being able for yourself to know what your why is, and that having that thing to hold on to when times are tough, and just, sometimes you veer off course because life happens, but being able to come back to your true north that really motivates you beyond a paycheck, beyond career and promotions, all that, the thing that keeps you going is really important. I would just want to go back a little bit to the kind of practical aspects of what Green X does, specifically because this is something we often speak about as well in our modules around sustainable design. And it's a little bit of that like user experience and understanding your user, but this idea of making sure that you reduce energy use before you even try and switch over to an alternative source. And
I
yeah,
love this.
I won't name drop now, but I know a wine farm that is going this route of making a significant investment in solar. But the first thing they did was doing this kind of energy efficiency report, and they managed to decrease their electricity use by something like 60%, right? By the investment
Ridiculous.
in the most energy efficient light bulbs, smart, simple things like the hotel rooms now have key cards that open the rooms so that a guest cannot leave the lights on in their room if they're not in the room. So your way
Brilliant.
to lock the room is also your way to switch the lights on and off. So to kind of to dummy proof some of this stuff, right? So take some of the decision making out of the consumer's hands. And only now that they've done that intensive shrinking of their electricity use, now they're saying, okay, so how do we take this 40%
Yeah,
and this is what we're taking to
I love it.
solar? Exactly. And I think there's two things around that the kind of reduce, and because then solar, people always say, but solar is so expensive, but not if
Then
you
it's cheaper.
actually, exactly,
Then
yes.
it's cheaper.
And then what I also really liked is how you touched on this idea of decentralization. And the students know this, like I'm all about biomimicry and what nature does. And we know that our way of putting all our eggs in one basket is just really dumb. No one in nature doesn't do that. It works with decentralized systems so that when one part becomes unstable, we have something to fall back on. And I think that's really maybe what excites me a lot about the energy revolution we're going into, is this idea of mixed energy sources, right? So
I love it.
that's what really excites me.
I love it. I love it.
And
Just on like
yeah.
mentioning the behaviors, or just the management and efficiency, that really gets me excited, eh? So just to mention, um, so you see the certificate here, right? So that highlights your efficiency level, and that gives you like an awareness of like where you are. Like if you get a D, our clients that get a D, they're like, what am I doing wrong? Our clients that get Fs, they're like, please come look at my facility, because everyone thinks they're an energy champion until you do this and you're like, hang on, what am I actually doing? But this is where it gets really fun. So I'd like you to see if I can maybe show you. So this is the certificate. This is what it looks like. It just highlights your compliance and your efficiency level. But here it gets super interesting. Installing smart meters, actually able to track your usage, and you're able to use the data to create all of these targets that people can aim for. You can all of a sudden make it very, very interesting. Like residences can compete with each other. We're trying to get something like that off the ground for the university. Hopefully that works. But you can use this to just compete against yourself as well, because I think the thing here is that we're not often aware of our energy usage. You can switch your light off, I mean on, and just leave it on and just walk away, especially in the daytime. Um, and yeah, I think when you're able to have data to compare, then it suddenly becomes really interesting to actually reduce your current usage. And for schools, I mean, we looked at 50 schools. All of them had the oldest technology lighting installed that uses 3 times more of the energy that should be needed. And the weird thing for me is that the light quality of that tube is also like twice as much. Like it's worse. It does
Mm.
half the job. So
Using double the electricity, yeah.
yeah, using triple the electricity, doing half the job. Like, how are we putting those things into our schools? The saddest thing for me was we just went to a school, replaced their lights, and we also were fortunate enough to see the department. And no shame to the department. I mean, they're just doing their job, but they were replacing the lights, right, with all of these old technology lights. That was very sad to see after we've just gotten sponsored all of these lights. Um, but yeah, I share in your joy of like just decreasing our usage first and then going solar.
Awesome. Antoinette, I've unmuted your mic. Oh, given you the permission to speak. Would you like to ask your question directly to Jason?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hey, Antoinette.
Hello. So my question that I posted in the chat is how, especially in the beginning, how did you get people to buy into your business idea, and how did you find dedicated team members to have the company that you have today?
Wow. Antoinette, thank you for those two questions, or that two-part questions. Really, really cool.
Okay.
The buy-in, I think there were a few different motivations for whoever bought in. I think the university, like they bought in because they see this as a implementation partner for for some of their social impact work. Because there's lots of initiatives, but this can be one of them, which is really cool. And then uh, when we saw through the research that we're actually saving money for schools, I think that's when everyone's eyes went open. And I mean, this is not like a silver bullet, and it's also not like heavy intellectual property. It's basically just know-how, and it's basically a service, and we're building tools around that. Um, and I think like that's how we got some of the initial founders and investors to buy in. Also, just the fact that it could be quite a nice tech idea, like to have your energy usage on your phone. It's able to like give you updates and tell you replace this and replace that and do this right now. Like that's really cool for some people. And then with the dedicated team, it's just to check and to see if the person's like vision aligns with what the company wants to do. Yeah, we've had quite a few like interns here and also like permanent people. And you can see like people have that vision. They wanna help society. Yeah, so it's just finding those people. I've also had the chance to work with other people that don't have that vision, and it was a privilege to still work with them because they work really hard. However, you can see that like the vision isn't there. Like they don't want to like work overtime to help like a school. Like they're just there for the paycheck. And at some points that's probably fine, but the dedication I can see more in the people that buy into the vision, the larger vision.
I think Antoinette as well, she's quite familiar with Launch Lab, but I think there's something, we were chatting a little bit, so Jason's office is still based at Launch Lab as well, and there's something about just placing yourself in the room with the right kind of people. I think especially when you're a student, making the most of all the opportunities that are just around and available, because it's much harder once you leave university, you know. Then we find ourselves being quite isolated in our silos, whatever the industry we're working in, and so make the most of your time, sign up for stuff, go to talks, attend things like this evening. I was just sharing with the 30ers again today how random sometimes these things are, you know. You have no idea who's going to be in the room at a presentation like this or at a pitch event. And I think that those kind of the good vibes attract each other. So I think you're in a unique position while you're still at university. There are just a lot of things that are low hanging fruit and easy to expose yourself to. And the other thing I hear in Jason's telling of the story is there's a very real need that his company is addressing. And I think it's when you've done that ikigai model for yourself, right? Like, what is the world calling for? And how do you actually pair that need with something that is scalable and can generate income as well, but then, you know, speaks to corporate social responsibility aspects. So yeah, you know, it's matching that real need with a very clear vision for yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for answering.
Thanks, Antoinette. Thanks so much for
All the
being
best.
here this evening. If there's anyone who wants to ask a last question, you're welcome to raise your hand and I'll unmute you. But I think we're all painfully aware of the fact that we are actually in public holiday territory now. It's almost 7 o'clock. I can hear the bottles being uncorked in the background. Yes. Jason, thank you so much for your time and just your enthusiasm. I think when I was telling the students about this talk, I also said, you know, it's such a privilege to be able to connect with people who aren't that much further in the journey, right? Like you were just, yay, look at your background. You were a student just the other day, you know, and I think that's really special to just see your positivity, aside from the amazing work that you guys are doing. But we really appreciate your time, and certainly will invite you back and share. We still have those videos that we recorded with you last year about your journey as a CEO and a startup and all of those things, and I will share that with the